So I'm going to go ahead and read off of some introduction slides to get us started off. Can you guys see this okay? Are you seeing the slides, or are you seeing the presenter view?
I'm seeing the slide and you on the side, just a little
Perfect. Thank you so much, Avis. So I just want to say a warm welcome to everyone again, and thank you so much, Sean, again. Today, we are going to be talking about Families and Relationships Part 2, brought to you by Dr. Avis Garcia, and I will be your host today. My name is Ella Driscoll Shikipohot. I'm from the Meskwaki and Winnebago tribes. So it's good to see you all today. This event is brought to you by the National American Indian and Alaska Native Prevention Technology Transfer Center, which is located at the University of Iowa, and we are part of a national PTTC network. And I'm broadcasting from Iowa City, Iowa. So it'd be really fun to see where everyone is from. So if you want to put your tribe or state that you're coming from today, I think that'd be really, really good to see. Mm-hmm. This project is supported by SAMHSA. The content is developed by the presenter, and the opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of SAMHSA, HHS, or PTTC. Following today's event, we will send out a follow-up email, which will include links to the presentation slides and the recording, information on how to request and receive certificates, and the link to our evaluation survey, which is also called our GIPRA. Ooh, okay, here we go. So although we are gathered virtually today, I just wanted to take this time to acknowledge the land and pay respect to the Indigenous nations whose homelands were forcibly taken and inhabited. Please take a moment to read this land acknowledgement, which was created by Keely Driscoll, Sean Bear, and myself. Okay. All right, you are currently muted. Please use the chat box feature to make comments or ask any questions. I think Avis will present, but if you have any questions, again, just please put them in the chat and we'll try to address them at the end. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And as for now, I will go ahead and hand off to Dr. Avis Garcia. Thank you so much for being here today. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Avis Garcia. My Indian name is Detas. That is a strong woman in Arapaho that was given to me by my grandparents. It was my great grandmother's name, and I was her first great grandchild, and she wanted me to carry on her name. So I'm enrolled in the Northern Arapaho tribe from the Wind River Reservation. My dad was Eastern Shoshone, also of the Wind River Reservation in Wyoming. I'm a licensed professional counselor, a licensed addictions therapist. I'm certified in criminal justice addiction counseling. I'm a certified trauma therapist. I've been working in the substance abuse field since 2001. And I had a little brief discussion with Ella before we got started that, you know, I often ask people what brings them to this work, or are you doing this work? And I'm glad she's going on to school, because we need more Native people doing this type of work. It's needed so desperately. I have my bachelor's and my master's and my doctorate in counselor education from the University of Wyoming. And I work with all ages of people. I do all types of counseling. I do specialize in substance abuse and trauma. And I also, everything that I've learned and from personal experience, a lot of what's taught in the textbooks and the classrooms that aren't made for Native Americans, it gives the perspective that I'm always trying to find a way of how is this going to work? How is this going to work with our people? And so I've had a lot of time to experience some things and try some different things to see how that works. And this presentation today, I've done it based on, we ran a little poll last week because I wasn't real sure what people want. And so if you guys have any suggestions, you know, of what you want to hear about, this is like a family series. And the first one that I did last month was on family therapy, like therapy theories and some therapy interventions with families. And that was all based on the textbook that my teacher gave me that I still have from the class. And it was just like the basic introduction to family therapy. And family therapy is something for me, I haven't traditionally done family therapy in an office. Most of my family therapy has taken place in a sweat lodge or a teepee. And this is how we do a lot of our work at home. And it's a more traditional setting for people where they're more comfortable. And I've done a lot of work with adolescents and juveniles, and the big part of that for me and helping those children was to get their family involved, even if it wasn't their parents. Maybe it was grandma and grandpa that came because they were raising them and taking care of them. So it's real important to get the family involved into treatment. But I will go on ahead and jump into today's slides. I've been doing this for 2 decades now, so I'm a storyteller. I share a lot of my experience from my years of working in the field. So let me hit the share screen button. And here's my slides. And this session will focus on families and addiction. Okay, no, it's not. Okay, here we go. The objectives that I will cover today is to identify who makes up a family, discuss the phases of recovery, identify goals for the identified patient, and the significant others for each phase. The next objectives will be to identify the key characteristics of addiction, learn about the craving response, identify phases of family response to addiction and recovery, list some key relapse issues for people in recovery, identify goals and strategies for each recovery phase, discuss social or cultural issues affecting individuals, couples, and families. And who makes up a family? It all depends on who you ask. It could be your immediate family, your parents, your siblings, your partner, your children, your extended family, your friends, our colleagues, our mentors, or anyone who will support that person in recovery. These are people who will provide healthy support, not enable and not criticize, and help the person in recovery be able to pick themselves up and to be able to do the next thing. And, you know, as natives, we have all kinds of family members that we adopt throughout my years of work. I've worked with a lot of youth that I consider them to be like children of mine. When I see them, they're always happy to meet me. And what is addiction? It is a physical, behavioral, and emotional response. It is a medical disorder. It is not helpful to think of addiction in terms of morality and willpower. If it was that easy, we wouldn't be talking about it today. It's a physical response that's going on in the body that makes changes to maintain the homeostasis. People using substances use it to take away, you know, some problems and other issues, which can lead to them lying and having craving and doing manipulation. Some of them even stealing, and they will guard it. because this has become their best friend. And once their brain changes and they start using the chemicals, it isn't easy for them to stop, because that has become, like I said, their best friend. It's worked, and usually after repeated use, it leads to addiction. This is the cognitive process that is the beginning stages of addiction. On the left-hand side, I have the positive aspects, and this is what usually draws people in early in life. Some are seeking relief from depression. Some people, it's a confidence boost. They don't have social skills, or they're not extroverted, and it kind of lets them feel comfortable. For people, I've heard it's relief from boredom. And for some, it's sexual enhancements. And that's, for some people, haven't been in a relationship, that they tie their relationships to that part of their life, which later leads to the negative aspects, which includes, this is just a few: employment disruption. They start missing work because they're having hangovers. Maybe they're not doing a very good job at work because they're under the influence or having hangovers. There may be relationship concerns. Children may be, confused and a little bit traumatized, wondering what's going on. The spouses may be complaining, and a lot of us natives live in extended family networks. So, it can cause a lot of problems within the extended family. And there are financial problems, and a majority of the time, a lot of the people that I've worked with throughout my 20 years of this work has been legal problems. And if it hasn't been legal problems, it's been the Department of Family Services that sends people because they've taken children usually out of the home. And so they make them go through all these hoops to get their children back. So the positive aspects, it outweighs the negative aspects in the beginning, because it does make them feel better. And they feel like life is just more exciting, and they don't see a problem with it in the early beginning of their life. Next is the cognitive process, the disenchantment phase. We have the positive aspects. This is a social currency. This may be the person who brings the good vodka or whatever to the party. There is an occasional euphoria, relief from lethargy. Some people like to use stimulants because it wakes them up. And I've done a lot of work in residential treatment where when methamphetamine first hit, a lot of the oil field workers were using it because they were working lots and lots of hours. Then this later becomes negative aspects. This may be nosebleeds and infections from snorting substances. A lot of times nowadays with these substances that people are using, we don't know what they're cutting it with. So it could be very dangerous. There's financial jeopardy. Instead of paying the bills, we're buying the pills or whatever it is to get high on. There's some family disruption. There's family distress. The whole family is stressed, and it becomes frustrating for everyone. Might even be a little embarrassing. And there could be impending job loss. I have had people quite often referred to me by their job because they tested positive or they got a DUI or something, and the job knew about it. So they wanted to make sure that their employee got the help that they needed. So we'll go on ahead. Like I said, they try to explain away all of this. They don't want you to focus on the negative things. They try to give good reasons as to why they need to use. Moving on is the conditioning process, which starts with the mild cravings, the strength of the conditioned connection. Starting out with the triggers, could be college parties, Friday nights, friends, weight gain, get some extra money, intimate situations, and depression. So then it starts to go from mild to moderate. So the responses will lead to, they'll start thinking about using the drug or the alcohol, the mild physiological arousal of just thinking about it, having some eager anticipation of use. They may be looking forward to Friday, cravings. They have a lot of cravings and occasional use. Like I said, it starts out with, for most average people, maybe college, maybe in high school. I grew up growing up on the reservation. We all, I think everybody did it. We had always had somebody's big brother or big sister who was able to get usually some alcohol for us. Some guys use steroids for body mass. Some people just want to feel better, or maybe they like to go out and go bar hopping when they have extra money, like they think it's the fun thing to do. And it gets, the things that you associate with that drinking or using is what will start that craving. So it starts to get more serious with the continued use and more frequent use. The conditioning process, the strong cravings, the strength of the conditioned connection. This is when it starts to take effect of the person. And with repeated use, this is what leads to the addiction. Again, we have the same triggers, the weekends, the friends that we think are the friends. We may have stress, not knowing how to cope with stress, boredom. Some people use it for anxiety. Some people are, one of the triggers is they're unemployed. They lost their job. And for many, I've often heard that it's loneliness. You know, I've asked even friends of mine of like, oh, why do you drink so much? And like, I do it to socialize because I get lonely and I don't want to sit at home by myself, which leads to the responses of the continual thoughts of using the drugs or the alcohol. It creates a strong physiological arousal. So the body is getting to the point to where it needs it to function. There will be strong cravings and there will be frequent use. And most people, when they start to develop obsessive thinking in early use, they may have a lot going on in their lives. And, you know, they may be thinking about drugs, or, you know, some of their sports may involve drugs. Some baseball teams may be drinking, or bowling involves a lot of drinking. Maybe there's food, a party, like exercise. People that use steroids will use it because they want to increase their physical endurance or build body mass. They may be having family problems, relationship problems with their boyfriend or their girlfriend. Maybe they're having problems in school. A lot of students when I was at the university that would get referred was, my grades are dropping, or they actually got cited for being under the influence. And so they would get referred to treatment when I was at the university. So with everything going on in their lives, they don't think that it is a problem. They're like, hey, I'm young, I'm just having fun. And like I said, that's usually how it starts out for most people early on. Moving on to the conditioning process, there's overpowering cravings, which is the strength of a conditioned connection. Here, the triggers can be any feeling. They can be angry. They can even be having a really good day. This could be during the day. This could be at night. Maybe they lost their job, or work is stressing them out. They may have a very challenging job that they don't know how to manage those problems in the workplace, which leads to the responses of, again, the obsessive thoughts about drugs and alcohol. It is a powerful response. It has led to intense cravings and almost leads to automatic use. So a lot of people that are in recovery, their learned way of handling all of the problems in life has been through using. And throughout my years of working, I've also learned that a lot of people, that this is a generational addiction. And when I researched my own family, it is generations of alcoholism in my family. And so it can be learned as you grow up. You might grow up with this in your home. So you see, well, mom does it and dad does it. And so, you know, that it can be a learned response from that way. And in my personal life, that's kind of what brought me to the field, was dealing with my own mother, who later in life became a severe alcoholic. And that's kind of what brought me to the field of wanting to help people, because I felt they were sending our people to these treatment programs or these counselors that were not Native American or didn't understand the culture. And so a lot of people, I think at that time, didn't feel understood. So if they might have tried to go, and just because of that cultural disconnect, it didn't work for them. So I often felt, you know, maybe if I get in this and I start doing this work myself, I might be able to make a difference. There are the progressive phases of addiction. It's introductory. There is the maintenance stage, again, the disenchantment phase, and then it leads to total disaster. Things begin to fall apart, and the addict can't fix their problems, and they've alienated all of their social supports. And I still have family that struggles with substance use. And, you know, there have been times I've just avoided them and cut them out of my own life, because I was like, I've had to learn over the years that sometimes you just need to eliminate those people out of your life, especially when they're not ready to get help. The family member's response to the drug use is the introductory phase. They may be totally unaware that there is any problem. There may be confusion regarding occasional odd behaviors. Maybe they're starting to get bad grades, they're skipping school, they're being out all night long. They may be concerned about occasional neglect of responsibilities. They start missing work, not going to school, not paying the bills, our regular day-to-day responsibilities. So this is when the families start to think something is going on here. The family member's response to the drug use. This is the maintenance phase. This is where we are aware of the problem. They may attempt to solve the problem, and they may start to take on all of the responsibilities. I've seen it happen in some families. So there may be confronting, some nagging. They might start spying on them. Parents might start searching the kids' room when they're not there to see if they can find any evidence of drugs. And taking on all the responsibilities because they are stressed that the addict can't do it anymore. So they feel like, well, they can't do it, I got to do it. Well, if they're not going to go to work and pay the bills, then I guess I got to go to work and pay the bills. So the significant other puts themselves in a position of having to take on a lot of responsibility, which also leads to shame and depression. It doesn't help the codependent or significant other believe that they can help this person do the next right thing by taking on all of the responsibilities. So they feel like that person is not capable. So a lot of times it is the wife, or the mother in the family. There is this dysfunctional family system where there is someone that takes all of that on. The family member's response to the drug use. Here is the disenchantment phase. There's avoidance of the problem, blaming the person who is using. We wouldn't be having these problems if they wouldn't be using drugs or drinking, or they might be blaming themselves. Maybe it's my fault this is happening. Maybe I shouldn't nag them. Maybe I drove them to this. There may be some guilt and some shame. Family members often feed off each other with the blame game, and they may be in a depressive episode or having some anxiety and not really knowing what to do about it. So I often find, again, throughout my years of experience, that a lot of their use can be self-medication for issues that is kind of complicated, because we can never tell if this is the egg before the chicken thing. Like, did they have depression and then start using, or did their mental health problems get caused from the substances that they've been using for so long? But now they've reached a point that what they're using isn't working anymore. They've built a tolerance to the alcohol, or no longer, they start to chase the high. They want to get that feeling, but it will never get back to that point again. More on the family members' response to the drug use in the disaster phase. This can lead to often to separation. Couples may separate. Maybe the family wants the person who's using out of the home. They don't want them there anymore. There may be internalization of bad feelings, a sense of resignation and hopelessness. And there is a lot of establishment of some unhealthy family rules. The person who's helping them may be, thinking they can't deal with this person anymore. Everybody in the family is having bad feelings. They're all having some hopelessness, some anger, some resentment. And this is where the family gets into the situation of, we don't talk about it, don't trust anyone, and we don't tell people how we feel. We keep that to ourselves. So it is often a family issue, as are a lot of things, not just addiction. So there may be people just now getting out of treatment. It doesn't matter if they're coming from outpatient treatment or residential treatment, but oftentimes, and I've seen this with juveniles when I first started working with them, because the parents would just like drop the kid off. So that's kind of how I started incorporating the family involvement. And how I got the family involved was through our sweat lodge. And I realized there was a huge disconnect in some families because they just weren't taught some of our cultural ways, and bringing that family together in a sweat lodge really made a big difference in their life. And it seemed to really help. So it's, some people may feel, distrustful of the person, and they may feel that the person is going to fail when they get out of treatment. So the family really needs to take a look at their own response, because you don't just get them out of treatment and they're magically cured and all these problems go away. Not if the family doesn't look at their role in what is taking place. So some of the benefits of family involvement. Participation by family members is associated with better treatment compliance and outcomes. Family members gain a clear understanding of recovery. Family members and the person in recovery understand their respective roles and goals. So, asking them, who in your family can you go to, who will be supportive to you? And for a lot of the younger people, I've often seen it's been the mom. She's trying to do everything she can to help her son or her daughter. And family members and the person in recovery need to get support in the recovery process as well. So not only do we tell Johnny to go to treatment or go to group, we need to look at ourselves and be like, what can I do to help my family get better too? Maybe there are some things that we haven't really thought about or looked at. So going to treatment is often the next right thing. And like I said, they go back home to that same thing, the same bitter, nagging, sick, and distrustful environment. And so what do you think happens? You know, I've even had people, when we first were doing treatment on the reservation, a majority of the people got sent off to residential treatment programs off the reservation. And when they got done with treatment, they were often picked up by the family or our friends, and they would come with drugs and alcohol. And they were just right back where they started. Like there was no careful planning and that person returning. So we really need to prepare them for things like that. And now, because of the costs of residential treatment, I know our tribe on the reservation has actually started its own very small transitional residential treatment program. And most of the funds are put into outpatient treatment services now. And only after we have them not do so well in treatment for maybe they have several relapses or they just can't seem to get it under control, then we'll really look at, okay, maybe this person is ready to get sent off to residential treatment. But it does, some people that go to treatment, I always say it's a 50-50 chance. There's a 50% chance they're going to be successful with it, and there's a 50% chance that they're not. So the family needs to be aware that, okay, maybe this time it didn't work. I have a really good friend. She's an older lady, and she went to residential treatment 6 times before she finally was able to stop completely. So, you know, if your family member is struggling, don't give up on them. You know, we can look at what happened at those relapses and what could be done different this time. And the first thing is to start being honest. This is step 1 about letting your family know how you feel, and not only being honest with yourself, but being honest with others. And of course, because of the long-term use, there, you know, it may be hard to get that trust. So the family will have to, you know, learn how to better communicate, which is counter to the don't talk, trust, or feel that usually is occurring in the family. So there is a need to learn communication skills, and it doesn't happen overnight. Honesty is hard, recovery is hard. The family and patient understand respective goals and roles. The patient's job is not to prove they are wrong. They need to create a new family structure that is based on honesty, trust, and commitment. We're not saying the person is wrong. It's important for everyone to put in, keep their radar on and be ready really fast to intervene with the person to help them. Being aware of moodiness is often a trigger that some people, I often call them, these are the white knucklers that have been sober for a long time. And so now they're starting to have some anger issues. So pointing out, you know, learning ways to cope with that. And sometimes it's not the identified patient, it's somebody at home. I have my moody days, you know, sometimes I have bad days. And so it's important for me to communicate to my family of like, I'm just having a really in a crappy mood today. So, you know, kind of just give me some space here. So it's, there's also a complete lack of boundaries. If the addict is upset, they're going to blame somebody for their use, and there'll be a lot of angriness and ugliness going on in the home. So we need to start working on setting those healthy boundaries. And when we're in a bad mood, especially those in recovery, as long as they let us know, hey, I'm not having a good day today, but I'm not going to take it out on you. You know, I'm going to, you know, find some other healthy way to deal with this. So the family members also need to get support in the process. So I often suggest if we can get a family therapist involved and work on some treatment for the entire family, which is a challenging process. It's not always easy. And everywhere that I've worked, it is a huge issue because not everyone wants to come and let everybody know what goes on in their family. So now moving on to the stages of recovery. The first stage is the withdrawal, which could be the first 1 to 2 weeks. Cravings are still conditioned. They see things that remind them of using. So the first and second week can be really challenging for them. Then we move on to the honeymoon phase, which is the next 4 weeks. They start to feel really good. And so we can talk about what we learned from prior experiences because we don't want to get overconfident and miss something. And then past that 4 weeks, the next 12 to 16 weeks, they can hit the wall. This is often called the PAWS, the post-acute withdrawal syndrome, to where all these ugly feelings that they were self-medicating themselves with, they're having trouble dealing with them, being clean and sober. So that stinking thinking starts to come into play and they start focusing on the negative things. And, you know, I tell them it could get worse before it gets better. So, you know, you can do this. We need to take a time out, do some checking in with them and letting them know that we're there to help them as the family. This is the time they need support the most. You need to be their cheerleader and letting them know that they could do this and being proud of them when they start using their new coping habits become regular. They need to find new places and new people to change their lifestyle, and that needs to become regular. They can't go back to hanging out with the same people unless, of course, they're helping somebody, that person is starting to get recovery. The readjustment is starting to take place and starting a new lifestyle, and it's not easy. They are still having cravings, and whatever it is, they may be thinking from prior experiences that, you know, they probably really want to use. So this wall starts wearing them down and bad things might be happening. So they're really in a difficult phase there. So if the family is being involved and paying attention, they're able to provide more support to this person. Withdrawal usually lasts 1 to 2 weeks. And I say this from an outpatient perspective because I've also worked in residential treatment where I know heavy methamphetamine users and opioid users, it takes at least a month, maybe 2 months for them to finally get clear enough to where they can focus and pay attention and learn and understand. They're still having cravings. You know, they've been using for a long time and this is what their body is used to. They may be having some depression now. Their energy is low. They're having trouble sleeping. They may have an increased appetite. Oftentimes they want a lot of sugar. They may be having difficulty concentrating. They may have anxiety and they have irritability. So they could be feeling depressed and helpless and hopeless a lot. And that is just a lot of their reactions to the withdrawal that they're going through. They need to start listening to their body, knowing when they're hungry, knowing when they're tired, starting to pay more attention to taking care of themselves physically and looking at their mood and what can they do about it, and having the family, you know, help support them, because the body still has to do its thing. The body has been through a lot of damage through the drug and alcohol use. So it takes a lot of time to heal. I often have told people, you know, when did you start using? And a lot of them started in their teenage years and they're like in their 30s and 40s. And now I tell them, you know, you interrupted that brain chemistry that was still developing. So now we've got some catching up to do, and I let them know you can heal, your brain can heal if we can get you to commit to changing to the recovery lifestyle. The next stage is the honeymoon. This is the pink cloud. This usually lasts about 4 weeks. They have increased energy, enthusiasm, and optimism. They're looking good and feeling better because they haven't had any substances. And people often feel that they're cured when they reach this stage, like, oh, he got treatment and he's not drinking anymore. Family members and also others will view this as the beginning of a relapse, because when I tell people that they need to look at their triggers, oftentimes these really good feelings makes them associate that with substance use of like, I'm feeling really good today. It'd probably be nice to go drink some beer or whatever substance it is. So this often coincides with the discharge from residential treatment. Like I said, the family needs to know that when their family member is coming home, this doesn't mean they're cured. This means they're just coming home and they need a lot of support. So they need to make sure that that family member is going to meetings. And I tell people, you don't have to go to NA or AA. A lot of people, especially natives, feel shame with that, but there is the red road to recovery and the Wellbriety. It is with Don Coyhis that has made that native based. So if you can approach it from that perspective, that is good. A lot of people, you know, there are peer specialists now, and I love them. These are people that have been there and done that, but they've been successful with recovery. So back home, they have their phone numbers right on the bulletin board. So when the patient has any problems, we let them know that they can call them anytime that they're feeling down and that they need some support, you know, just because they've, you know, again, like I said, they may have been through treatment more than once. So we need to look at doing something different this time. So being able to figure out for them what happened that led to the relapse, that we can do things differently this time. We don't want to tell them that they're going to relapse. They're still trying to figure out how to live life on life's terms on a day-to-day basis. Treatment, a lot of these people haven't lived on a schedule. They have slept all day, not worked, and then party all night long. So they don't have a regular routine in their day-to-day life like most of us usually do, you know, get up, go to work, come home, you know, take care of our families, you know, take care of ourselves and go to bed. So it's helping them create a schedule. And oftentimes I've printed them right off the internet, you know, from the time they wake up to the end of the day, Sunday through, you know, the whole week, so that we could get them to try to create some routine in their lives. You know, what are you going to do on these days at these times, and looking for times to put other things that they might be interested in doing. So they need to get used to having some morning and evening check-ins to make sure that they're going to their sponsor or talking to their counselor or their peer support recovery person and going to meetings. And I tell people, again, like I said, not A or NA, they are one of the biggest things that I see the most effective at home is the sweat lodge. And some of these people, they don't want to come to treatment group, but they'll come to that sweat lodge. And I said, I don't care if this is what draws them here. I'm glad to have them here. So even ourselves, it's good to do a morning check-in and prepare yourself for the day. And at the end of the day, you know, how did my day go? So it's good to maybe check in with them, like, how did your day go? And there's a lot of things in there that needs to expand their social support system. Sometimes all the families aren't there all the time. So we need to make sure that we don't have to be the alcohol police in the home, that they start to take on that responsibility themselves, and so that the family can start focusing on their own needs. Then this is the wall, which usually lasts from 12 to 16 weeks. They still have depression, low energy, they're feeling worn down. Like I tell them, you know, it's going to get hard before it gets better. You need to make sure you get them in a safe and secure environment. They are still recovering. Their body is still recovering from the effects of addiction, the lack of sleep. And during this wall phase, there's a high risk of relapse. So we need to make sure that we can remind them that it's worth it. They can do it. Look how far you've come, and that they've got support, and learning some coping skills, some relapse prevention coping skills. They may have depression, anxiety. They may be easily overwhelmed. And this is when I tell people that we will discuss co-occurring disorders of maybe you've been self-medicating yourself, or when did you notice you started feeling depression, or when did you start feeling anxiety, and suggesting maybe it's time to get some psychiatric intervention or some medical intervention and get them, you know, not everybody needs medication. So sometimes it's helping them just learn some coping skills, but research does show when we treat both of them, but you want to start getting to these mental health issues after they've been clean and sober for at least this 12 to 16 weeks of time, if possible. Then we move on to the readjustment phase. This is about 8 weeks or longer. The person in recovery and the family begin returning to a more normal lifestyle. So the family is adjusting. After extended abstinence, the person in recovery and the family members begin working on marital, emotional, and psychological issues that will strengthen the family. So a lot of times it is not the identified patient, that may be someone in the home. You know, I've encountered a lot of clients where the stories that they share leads me to believe that their parents have had mental health issues, and that, like I said, this is what they learned. This is how the environment that they've grown up in. So they need to learn to develop a normal lifestyle and manage their own emotions. And this is for both the patient and the family. Learn some healthy coping and communication skills. So, you know, our outpatient treatment program that they call the Matrix has probably 100 different topics, and more stuff is added to it to help these patients in recovery to learn some communication skills. They start to have a pretty regular routine. They're starting to deal with day-to-day stuff without getting freaked out. When they have demonstrated that for a few weeks, then we can go into the deeper issues. You can't go right into it in the beginning, especially if they're an outpatient. You want to give them some time to get some so clean and sober time underneath them before we take that next big step. Some goals for withdrawal for the person in recovery. They need to discontinue the use of the drug. They need to learn some specific techniques for avoiding relapse. They need to learn about the process of addiction and about drug effects. And I tell them that we're not here like doing treatment. I said, most of what we're doing here is education. I said, we call it psychoeducation, and it's just to teach you, you know, how you probably ended up where you're at, how you learned, how you dealt with your problems and your emotions. So it's learning about all of those things, so that it's a lot of education. The family members need to decide if they're going to be a part of the recovery process. So not everyone has to get involved. And I always say if we can get at least one person involved, it is really going to help them tremendously. And recognizing that addiction is a medical condition that requires ongoing care. So they need to not use at all. They need to be calling a sponsor, going to meetings or some type of a support meeting. You know, I tell them they can go to a sweat lodge, and that's a good thing. And like I said, that has been a biggest recovery success on my reservation. And then they need to find any activity that they can think of so that they don't want to use, you know, maybe they might want to start going to the gym or learning, going, maybe taking some classes. You know, if they could stop, they would have already done it, you know. And there are some that can actually just stop. And like I said, and then there's those that don't. There's some that struggle, and it may take them many times of trying to get help to finally get help. Some goals for the honeymoon phase: the person in recovery really needs to improve their physical health. Their body has been neglected and it has taken a physical toll. They need to identify their personal triggers and relapse justification, and use targeted techniques to stay abstinent. So this is not a cookie cutter treatment program for anyone. What might trigger me might not trigger you. And what works for me might not work for you. So if this is a person's third or second time in treatment, we might say, well, let's look at what was working, and then, you know, what can we do differently this time? So this is where we will work on their relapse plan or their recovery plan or their wellness plan. They need to be eating well. They need to be sleeping well, getting even just a little bit of exercise. What excuses have they used in the past, and what are their triggers so that they know they don't fall back to that? And what do you anticipate you're going to do when your triggers surface? How are you going to deal with them? When I have them do their safety plan or wellness plan or relapse plans, I like to go with the 3-to-1 ratio. So every trigger that they will list, I like them to have at least 3 things for each trigger so that they can put it somewhere where they can see it and then have a constant reminder, have, you know, have some alternatives, more than one, and reasons to justify not relapsing. So one of my clients said what helped him the second time was to put the consequences at the top of his plan, that I'm going to go to jail for 300 days or however many days they had hanging over their head. And he said that was what worked. So I was like, hey, well, you found something that worked for you. Family needs to start doing their own therapy. And we don't necessarily have to go to a therapist, and family therapists are few and far between on the reservations. I think if the families can learn to just start talking together, or I think in my own home, my therapists were my grandparents. You know, whenever I was having a bad day or a bad time, they knew me so well. They knew that I could always go and talk to them. So sometimes even just having an elder, connecting them to an elder. So, you know, the family needs to work to support that person's recovery and recognize and discontinue the triggering interactions. They don't want to have the nagging or accusing the person again, and being able to find other things that they can do instead. Because maybe I have seen situations where I had a young lady who said it was her mom, and a lot of it, not that she wanted to blame her mom, but her mom didn't realize that the way she was communicating with her daughter was very triggering, because she got very controlling. And so once they were willing to work on those issues, they were able to get things changed, and it started to change their relationship. And so trust doesn't just fall in their lap. You know, these people have done a lot of damage. They have lied, they have stolen, you know, there's a lot of things that the family needs to be forgiving and understanding to that person, because if they're really going to get in recovery, they need to have some support. Some goals for the wall: the person in recovery should maintain stable abstinence from all substances, repair significant relationships, develop a recovery support system outside of the treatment center, and recognize and cope with their dangerous emotions. The family members should decide whether they want to recommit to the relationship. Well, you know, I haven't talked to my sister in about 5 years now. Maybe she'll be different this time. So I'll you know, I'll give her a chance if I want to help her. And family members should find ways to enrich their own lives. Don't be so involved that you think you got to be there all the time to help this person. So again, maybe you want to take a class, or you want to go to the gym, or enjoying your own life and not being so focused on trying to be the police at home. So they need to be supportive, and still supportive if the family is separated. Sometimes families break up and separate. So it's not, the whole point isn't to get them back together, but oftentimes the significant other might say, you know, well, yeah, I'll help and I'll be involved, but, you know, they're not going to go jump right back in the relationship. They want to make sure that this person is serious and figure out how to practice some healthy communication skills instead of resorting to using substances. Some goals for readjustment. The person in recovery should monitor components of successful recovery. So what's working well? Let's make sure we keep doing that. Recognizing those relapse indicators and have some prepared responses. Clarify new roles in the healthy relationships. Set goals for continuing a new lifestyle after their program, because treatment does end. You know, and I always tell them, I'm not here to preach to you or tell you not to, but, you know, where are you going from here? And, you know, what are your plans? What are you going to do? You know, some people start working and they discover they like working, and they do start to do very well. The family members need to accept the limitations of living with the person in recovery. Develop their own individual, healthy, and balanced lifestyle. So I always tell people, if you got kids, you're their number one teacher. They're learning from you. So whatever you're doing, that's what they're learning. So you have to be mindful of, like, what do you want your kids to learn? Monitor yourself for relapses to former behaviors. So again, this could be the overpowering family member that wants to be controlling and needs to be like, okay, I need to step away from this and take a time out. And also to be patient with the process of recovery. This is ongoing for the first year to 18 months, and it should be a daily check-in on those relapse triggers and look at those warning signs, how they're going to handle them. How did they handle them? How did their day go? Was it effective? If it wasn't effective, what could they do different the next time? So you don't have to take 2 hours a day. It could take as little as 5 or 10 minutes at the end of each day, just to reflect on how the day went for them. You know, they got out of touch with what was going on in their life and in their family because they were using. So they need to start to get in touch with themselves, learning more about their physical, emotional, and cognitive needs. And for the family, you know, you don't want to have alcohol laying around the house, or it's probably not a good idea to go somewhere where alcohol is going to be flowing all over the place. Finding grounding and centering for each person to learn to be okay and manage some difficult situations. The family may go back to the suspicion, anger, and resentment. So we need to really, be mindful of our own behaviors and find our own coping skills. It's not just the people in recovery that need to focus on that. The family should also take a look at themselves if it's at all possible. Some days will be better than others. They could be having a bumpy time. So be patient. Be patient with the time and try to have more open communication. So learning to be able to talk about what's going on, just checking in, how you doing? How's it been going? Is there anything you need to talk about? And what I like about the one program that I work with on the reservation is more like an open treatment program. So we don't have like set schedules and times. And if you're late, they can come whenever they want. We have like a menu of what's going on that week. So they could be like, okay, this is my schedule and I can come to that meeting and that meeting. And well, we might put Friday might be a special topic, and maybe that might be something they want to come and learn about. So they can make arrangements, if some of them have jobs, if there's something they really want to attend. Some key relapse issues for people in recovery: those friends who use drugs. I have had so many people that this has been their biggest relapse trigger. They run into a friend they used to use with, or they run into the dealer calls them and says they have stuff, and they may have a lack of sane and sober social support. So it's helping them find those people that they can spend time with that are healthy for them and who really do support them. A lot of these people that are in addiction that think that their friends that are using are friends. I'm like, if they're your friends, they would be supportive of you and understanding and go places with you and make a commitment not to use if they're going to go do things with you. We also need to be mindful of those emotional environmental cues that are associated with drug use. So this is those billboards. This is those commercials on TV that makes drinking look like it's just the best thing in the world, which, that's oftentimes triggers. It could be music. They could be having some severe cravings. They can have some uncontrolled mood disorders. Like I said, we may need to encourage them to consider getting some help. They may need to get their chemicals balanced and learn to avoid extreme stress whenever possible. I know there's no way we can possibly avoid it at all, but learning how to management. And also a big issue that's come up in recovery has been the connection between drugs and sex, that just learning how to be with their partner sober and not on drugs is an issue in and of itself. So sometimes couples might want to spend a few sessions to talk about that. And as time has gone on, I know in my culture, it's something we don't openly talk about, but I'm finding more and more that people are starting to open up and talk about those issues. And then boredom. I really worry. I have some clients who start working 2 jobs back to back, and they're not giving themselves any time off. And they're like, I can't be bored. I have to be doing something. And I'm like, they can be replacing one addiction with another addiction. So I tell them some people turn into workaholics, and that's not good either. So learn to be comfortable with that boredom. So they need to be with people who won't encourage them to use. And they need to be with people who are sane. They may be sober and never used anything, but they could also have some issues. So there's a big emphasis on sane. And being mindful of people who stress them out. You know, there are certain family members that I'm like, oh, I love them, but I know I can only be around them for so long because they do things that probably stresses me out. Um, Learning to figure out what their cues are and how they're going to deal with them. You can't avoid them all. So what are you going to do? Holidays are big triggers for a lot of addicts. So I often have them do a holiday plan of what their plans are going to be to stay sober. So up to 30 to 45 days later, they can still be having cravings and withdrawals again, post-acute withdrawal. This is usually with opiates and benzos. So we need to be aware of that. Depression, all of a sudden, we need to be aware. Communicate, don't assume it's just a part of the recovery process. They may need a little extra help. And so knowing what your resources are in the community. Right now, a lot of our mental health services have gone to telehealth because of the COVID. And we've seen a huge increase in people using it because they don't have to go to the clinic or know that they're going to the counseling office because they can get on the computer and have a session with somebody. So a lot of them have been really open to that. So that is something that's changed and may stay. It may be a mood disorder, but there are things that they can do to stabilize those neurochemicals. Sometimes it's just, I tell them, sometimes it's just temporary. And if we could help you find some coping skills, maybe we can work through it. Plan for extreme stress. Who are they going to call? What are they going to do? And so they need to be aware of things that remind them that they want to use and be prepared to run away or pretend there's a fire, you know, whatever it is for them to get themselves out of that situation immediately. And bored people need to find things to get busy to do. On our reservation, we have a craft day, and the ladies come and they learn how to sew quilts and skirts and do beadwork, and they even allow the staff that some of those staff do some very beautiful beadwork. So we bring them in and they teach their beadwork skills to, you know, maybe some of the people there want to learn beading. And what I've also learned, you know, a lot of natives are very talented in art. So sometimes we'll run, you know, little art contests for, maybe we'll put it on a t-shirt because there's an event going to be coming on that we're going to celebrate, and well, maybe their art gets picked for that. So being able to find creative outlets for them is very, very helpful. Some key relapse issues for family members. There is always that fear of the person in recovery returning to drug use. So there's a lot of trust issues that are not going to go away overnight. They need to learn to effectively communicate with the person in recovery so that they know what they're going to do is going to take them a long way. Also, time and seeing that the person is doing the next right thing. If the addict goes away, some people's lives fall apart. They got so used to living what they would rather they would just go get drunk again. So they need to learn that they need to learn how to communicate and be with that person and not want them to relapse. You know, the fear of being alone. Hey, Johnny got sober. He decided he's going to go off to school now. So, you know, there may be the fear of, you know, being without them. Lack of individual goals and interests for family members. So like I said, if there's something you want to learn about for yourself, develop your own interests, and maybe you want to make some new friends, and still doing everything that you can do to help the person feel like they can be successful and that they are doing the next right thing. So it's always good to help them learn how to manage the anger and resentment. And that's on both sides for both the user and the family members, because you can't hang on to that forever. We need to let that go. That's in the past. we can't constantly bring that up to them. So the early recovery phase is 12 months. And with the presence of the family and a therapist, that they can just establish some goals that helps them serve as a sounding board so that they can get comfortable going to talk to someone. And my peer specialists have come to me sometimes and been like, oh my God, so and so told me all these problems, and I'm not a counselor. And I'm like, yeah, you are. These peer specialists can be trained some basic counseling skills. I said, that person trusts you enough to come to you. They feel like they have that relationship with you. So don't be afraid of them. They just want to be heard and supported. And, maybe if a referral needs to be made, then we'll talk about that. So, this is a family process that's going to take time. We don't want to enable the person, and the whole family has to work together to create a healthier new environment. And if they've been drinking for 15, 20 years, this is not an overnight process. The first time doesn't always work. Although, I have seen some people that have just stopped, and I was like, wow, I've always wanted to find out what it was that they did. In summary, we just talked about that there are multiple phases of recovery. It is important to identify the individual relapse triggers and warning signs. Discriminative stimuli indicating a relapse may need to be deconditioned. So certain things that they've been conditioned, we need to uncondition so they learn coping skills to stress, or if they're having a bad day. Both the identified patient and the significant others need to engage in recovery activities for at least the first 8 to 12 months. So, if the family decides to go, let's go hiking up in the mountains, or let's go fishing, or just cook a family meal together, and everybody all make something to share with the meal. Like I said, not everybody's triggers are the same. So what works for one person isn't going to work for the next person. So they have to design their own program that meets their own needs. And when we start to see those behaviors that we might be suspicious, we don't need to go, here we go again. Like I said, this didn't happen overnight. And so don't expect them to change overnight. Patients, if they rush into this, will have to end up, they may resort to using old behaviors and stinking thinking. So the more patience you can have with them, the better it is going to be. So it's important to slow everything down and try to do it right the first time so that they don't have to go back and do it all over again. I have sent, I found this really good article. It's called Living with Addiction, the Setup. I sent it to Ella as an attachment today for those of you that are interested in learning more about addiction and people that live with it, the effects on the children and the family. So this has been included as an attachment today for you to download, and I highly recommend it. It might be a good, we do supervision once a week. So maybe I have everybody read an article, and this is our topic of discussion, so that, we continue to learn as professionals as well that are helping people. This new book, I listed a couple of books along with this handout, because I often get questions when I do presentations. So I tell people, I do research when I do these presentations, and this is a new book. I love it. It is called Addiction in the Family. It's helping families navigate challenge, emotions, and recovery. So the information on this book is included with the handout. It's really simple, right to the point. It's one of the best books I've seen, and this is like hot off the press. Another book that I like is called How to Help the One You Love. It's a little bit more longer, a little more in depth, but there are a lot of exercises that people can look at. You know, they need to look at how does food affect their body issues. And a lot of people in recovery, I've seen people that have told me they resorted to sugar addiction and gained a lot of weight. So like I say, they can sometimes switch one addiction to another one. But this is a very good book. I recommend for family members to read, or, you know, to read it here and there and maybe have some discussions about it. So if you know anybody who wants to read about it, this is a good book. And I will open up now for some questions from the participants. And I guess I would just like to know, did you learn something new today? Or was there something that you heard about that, you were able to relate to your experience already? And is there something that you got from this that, you'll be able to go and apply to your work? Okay, let me open the chat box and see what we got in there. See if we have any questions. Okay.
Yeah, if anyone would like to ask a question, please feel free to unmute. We would really love to hear your feedback, of course. Avis, I personally had a question.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, what are some healthy approaches for maybe people who have issues with addictions, who want to be involved in the community and they want to get back to those spiritual practices and they want to be a good role model and participate, but I've heard cases for a lot of people where they go to powwows or they go to other cultural community events, and it's actually one of their triggers, even though it's such an important part of their identity and feeling like they're surrounded by healthy, supportive relationships and community ties. It's actually like in the background, like, oh, like I could be doing this too. It's almost like a trigger. Do you have any like advice or approaches that you would use when that happens?
This is a real huge one that I've seen from my own personal perspective over the years of working in this field for Native Americans, especially, is they drop out of those ceremonies. They are ashamed and they know that people know they've been drinking or using, so they might feel judged and afraid. And that's always the first thing to go. There is when they're trying to fill a spiritual need. They want to feel whole. They want to be proud of who they are and where they come from. And like I said, I've discovered families that didn't learn these things. And I was blessed to be raised by my grandparents, and they raised me because my mother couldn't. And my dad was a police officer, so he was they separated and he was a whole different person. So he was, a good positive impact in my life. Even arrested some of my friends in high school that I would hear about from him. And it is important to get them back into it. And oftentimes back home, the sweat lodge has been good. And if you know your community well enough, like I say, I speak for where I come from. I do not speak for all Native Americans. I'm Northern Arapaho, so my Dene friend, we often have conversations about, well, when this happens, this is what we do. And then I might tell her, well, we make comparisons. We both have PhDs and she's fun to talk to. And so we talk about being able to connect people. So I've discovered families haven't been taught and they want to learn. So we open up the sweat lodges back home to the family. So I am always happy when I see moms and dads come with the kids, or they might be families that are, what do they call, they've been married before, but now they're together and they've got kids and they're trying to have a happy family. It is so good to see them come to the sweat and participate as a family and share a meal together, and they enjoy that interaction. And if you know the elders in your community, and we just had one guy who was really good and he retired, and he is up in he's a Cheyenne, and he was an older guy who did a lot of the treatment at our program, who was really good at talking to a lot of the clients. So we incorporate a lot of our culture into our treatment programming on the reservation. So when these people go off the reservation, it often concerns me. So I really try to look for those places that incorporates traditional cultural healing practices in it, so that I know that they're going to have that where they go, because they can be in places where they're just like a fish out of water. And I've worked in places like that where this native person is like, can't totally relate to anybody that's in there. They feel like a misfit and that like they don't fit in. So helping them to learn about their history. I'm reading this section here that Sean Bear posted on cultural factors. And my next session on families is really going to look at Native counseling approaches. And I'm also doing a trauma series. And my very last session in that trauma series is one that I've done. I've been asked to come to conferences here in Wyoming to represent the Native and educate people about Native life. And so one of my biggest pet peeves is people talking about the drunk Indian, like they have the stereotype that we're all dumb and we're all alcoholics and we're all lazy and all this stuff. So I really counter that with, again, I speak for my people, because I know the historical trauma is intergenerationally passed down. Like it's been passed through me, through my grandparents. I've been affected, it still affects me. Even my children have done school projects on it. So I think it's really, I feel that a lot of our schools are here in Wyoming, they are now required to incorporate more Native education methods into the schools, because that was something that was totally disregarded. And when I went to the university and did my dissertation, all of the methods they were teaching just on how to write. And I tell people, you know what, I went back to school late. I'm a high school dropout, so I share that all the time. I thought hanging out with my friends and smoking weed was cool, and not going to school was cool. And with my mom being an alcoholic, she didn't really care. And I had to get older and realize what was missing in my life. But education is the biggest factor. And so when I did my dissertation, I didn't want to focus on anything bad. I'm tired of white people writing stuff about us that's negatively biased, that presents everything just negative, when our cultures are beautiful, our reservation is beautiful, and that our young people need to be proud of who they are. And a lot of what I learned, I minored in Indian studies because I was so fascinated in learning about, all of the traumas. Almost every single tribe in the United States, all 567 federally recognized tribes, we all have different beliefs, different foods, our languages are different. So there are a lot of different things. So like I said, if you guys attend my last trauma session, which I think might be in June, because I'm extending the brain-based series because there's just so much to cover, is really going to focus on the substance use and intergenerational trauma. And I've gotten some really good feedback on that from people that were not Native. They said it just helped them to understand so much, because I've gone to meetings when I was working as a counselor with my master's degree, where a lady that I actually knew from the university who was not Native said that this intergenerational trauma was just a bunch of hoo-ha, and that she felt that the Natives were using it as an excuse. And I got up and left. I had to excuse myself because she really upset me when she did that, because I now that I'm older, I probably would have confronted her and shared my perspective on that, because, you know, and I run into people that, you know, are in treatment that, hey, they decide to go to college, you know, they're like, hey, I have a girl who is graduating in May who went to college, and she is one of our peer specialists, and she's a single mom, and she's even raising some of her sister's kids. And so some of these people do real amazing. And so the peer specialists are very good at helping a lot of our Native people, because they're able to relate to having been there and done that.
So may I make a comment?
Yes.
So my name is Edward Anapia. I work for the Confederated Tribes of the Goshute Reservation, and I'm located in Salt Lake City. Thank you so much for your discussion. It's very heartwarming and well received on my behalf. What I wanted to say was, I've become far more patient, and I don't want to say empathetic, that's too much of a white word. With people who are experiencing, you know, issues of substance misuse. And what's made me more understanding is this COVID crisis, you know, and I can see how people are reacting to the societal pressures that are on them. So this COVID incident has done two things. First of all, it's made people more aware of the health disparities that exist. And it's also, like I say, made people like me more aware of the great need that is out there in our community. But the thing is, and I can't speak on behalf of Native people because I'm a member of the Ngāpuhi tribe from the Taitokerau district of Aotearoa, New Zealand. But our people and your people have been experiencing this since contact. They continue to belittle us. And it's a wonder we're even functioning.
It is exactly true. I share with the people when I do groups that the Europeans brought the alcohol, hoping we would kill ourselves with it. And some of us do and are, you know. I've lost family members to, if it wasn't the alcohol, it was the accident or whatever was involved, that involved substance. And, you know, I have family that are still struggling. My brother just got out of treatment for probably his third time. And his older daughters are like, you know, they've been through this before. And so they're already telling the younger niece and nephew of mine, this ain't gonna last long. Dad's done this before, you know. And I'm like, you know, every time I try to cheer him up and cheer him on, you know, I tell him, hey, you're a Marine veteran, you graduated high school, you're an awesome bull rider, you know, there's still, you know, he's, you know, build people up, and he's learning to do carpentry stuff, and he does a really good job at it. So that's what I told my niece. I said, you know, don't be so negative. I said, maybe this time it's going to work and he's going to be better. And some people, the reason why I'm covering trauma is a lot of the addiction. I would say 75% of the people that I have worked with have severe trauma, major, multiple traumas. And so I've gotten a lot of training to become a certified trauma specialist and being able to help people work with that. But I tell people I've been through a lot of trauma in my own personal life, and being raised by my grandparents who were traditional Arapaho that lived that life. I never went to a mental health counselor. I went to ceremony. I went to sweat lodge. I went to fast. I went to Sundance, and I went to Native American church. And I was healed through, we have our own ways to help ourselves. And so when you were asking the question, how do we do it? Sometimes it's just finding somebody you know that goes, and they're often more than willing to help, invite the person or bring the person in and teach them what they need.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for taking time today to attend this session. I hope you learned something from it. And, you know, it's not a perfect presentation. And, you know, I have worked with people that have to go home to where there's people using in the home. So there are some very challenging situations out there. I was just talking to my son last night. I'm going to go back to my reservation very soon. And I said, I'm very disappointed with one of my family members that gets arrested and they let out of jail the next day. Why are they not referring her to get help? You know, so my plan is to go home, and I'm going to be knocking on some doors and talking to some people and being like, why are we just some of these people need serious help, and why do we just arrest them and then turn them loose again? When if we could get them to the mental health counselor or to the doctor, or, you know, let's try to do more to help them and not just let them out again because they're just go through the revolving door in the court system.
We have a health to wellness court here in Oregon too.
Mm-hmm.
That if I can try to refer them without any, how do you say it, without any arrests.
Mm-hmm.
So if I see people struggling, I can actually get them into our health and wellness court, which we also have a peace-giving court too. So, you know, for anything that's actually when they do get something written down, so they have to go. We can get them referred from state courts to our peace-giving court, and we can refer as clinicians and whatever we're doing. If we see a problem with a family, we can actually bring them into that court also.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how many other have peace-giving or health to wellness courts, but that's another avenue that helps us anyway.
Oh yeah, I love those programs. They are very beneficial, and I have seen people do very well in those programs. I've got a meeting coming shortly with one of my people that I mentor. So
Yeah.
thank you all again. I will be on next week, and next week I believe I am covering, it's the essential skills for substance abuse. These sessions are presented to help those that are seeking the certification or licensure so that they can be prepared to take the exam to join the field. We need people, you know, when I get people in recovery, I really try to encourage them. Like I said, my peer specialist is graduating from college. So, you know, we need people, Native people helping our own people.
Absolutely. And yes, I want to be respectful of time, but I just want to give a warm thank you to Dr. Garcia. Thank you so much for this amazing presentation. And I would like to thank all of you for joining us in this powerful educational space. I'm going to post the GIPRA survey one more time. If you have just a couple of minutes to fill that out, that really helps us get feedback and continue on with these events. And it really helps our center be supported by our funders. But yes, I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I hope you all stay healthy, and we will see you in upcoming presentations by Dr. Garcia or next month in the next PTGC webinar. See you, everyone. Have a good one.